one more thing you weren't expecting, and complete shutdown.
Yes, exactly right. You know, it's funny you say that. Last night, like went to bed early, expecting to sleep great, and just like one of those nights of just like kid making noises, dogs fucking making noise. It's just like, what the fuck? Can we just get like, can everyone just shut the fuck up, please? Anyways,
Yeah,
you know
no,
what I
I
mean?
feel you.
Yeah.
I had all intentions to go to my normal bedtime, and I've learned that I can't go to bed earlier than 8. And usually, if I have a really hard, rough workout, especially
Yeah.
round 2,
Yeah.
like I'm ready to go to bed by 6. And sometimes I'm
Yeah.
like, fuck, there ain't nothing going on. I'll go to bed and
Uh-huh.
I'll have a coma. But I was fighting the sleep monster, and then I get in bed, and the moment I hit the bed, I'm like, I'm not tired anymore. It's like,
Yeah.
fuck.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
11, then
There's
midnight.
there's
I'm
a
like,
sweet
fuck.
spot. There's a sweet spot you've got to hit for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fucking
100%.
Whoopstrap, you're a piece of shit. Constantly telling me I can't get enough rest.
Exactly
Ugh.
right. Exactly right.
Waco, man, you are somebody that I've been wanting to talk to, not only because of what you're doing now, but I feel like now more than ever, we need to grab entrepreneurs, people that have gone into the second chapter in their life and done incredible things to show, like, sort of like what I like to say, the PDSS for life after the military. I know when I was going through my pivot, I felt like I was going to be a failure. I wasn't going to be able to find a way to make it in the civilian world. And I wanted to cling desperately to like the known path. But every time I went into the unknown, that felt a little better, and it felt a little more unique and completely authentic to who I am. And I'm thinking the more we share these stories, the more we're able to highlight individuals that have gone the unconventional way, the more it gives our brothers and sisters confidence to pave a way of, like, pushing away from shore, being willing to try something new,
Sure.
because that's what we really need to celebrate and hold up to the spotlight, not the individuals that, are constantly being negative in our veteran echo chambers filled with it. So
Yes.
today,
Yes,
this is
it
all
is.
about you, man. But
All
before we
right.
dive into the success and the pivot, tell me about your service, man.
I always joke that my service is probably the least glamorous part of my career, and you gotta lean into that stuff and poke fun at yourself. So
Yeah.
I served in the Marine Corps. I was an infantry Marine 0351, and then I was also a combat water survival instructor, and I was also an infantry scout. I did boot camp Paris Island, joined right out of high school, so signed the papers at 17, and then shipped out July after I graduated from high school.
Damn.
And then I went out. So I was stationed out of Kaneohe Bay, and we do our deployments to Okinawa. And then while we're in Okinawa doing run ups to deployments, we would go to Mount Fuji, Australia. We did a couple. We were on ship a few different times, just through Southeast Asia. So we do. Have you ever heard of a VED Metcap? You ever heard
Yeah.
of that? Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So we did a number of those in places like Malaysia, the Philippines,
Nice, dude.
Thailand. Which there was no danger in anything like that. As the Marine, we were just the security element, while the Navy and the Seabees and everybody else did kind of like the real things, the real work there. But like as a young person, being 19, 20 years old, like being exposed to that level of poverty was something that was real.
Yep.
You see a lot of that on TV and growing up. And I grew up, I joined in 97. And so that was back when they were doing the poverty commercials in Africa, and that's still very much a thing, not suggesting it's not. But you see that and you're like, we're so far from it. You can't possibly even like realize or understand how good we have it here in America. And I just will never ever forget those memories, because for all of our faults and all the naysayers and all the people who want to poke holes at this big, great, amazing country that we have, we still hit the lottery, the where we were born lottery, or where you're able to immigrate to, or where you're able to raise your family lottery, regardless of all the stuff that's wrong with this place. And
Yeah.
I think that's just something that everybody has to just remember, as we're sitting there bitching and griping about what's wrong, and focus a little bit more on the cup being half full and how we can make this place better.
Dude, absolutely.
Yeah.
And our military is such a force for good that we forget about.
It
Like
is.
we do so much wherever
Yeah.
we go. We highlight. Look, I'm not saying we get it right all the time, but we travel around the world and we bring fresh water,
Oh yeah.
resources, humanitarian aid.
Schools. Yeah.
I've met so many, and the thing that's unique about being at those fleet missions you guys do, like you guys travel everywhere,
Yeah.
and yeah, you're not running and gunning, which is a byproduct of the GWAT. That everybody
Yeah.
thinks that wherever you go, you're just fucking kicking indoors, just
Killing
murdering
people.
people.
Exactly right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's not
But
the truth, man.
yes,
We're a force
exactly.
for good, man.
Right.
You go to port
Mhm.
and you go to these countries and you go there to build schools. We have amazing, like, take for example CBs. People don't highlight what our CBs do. They don't understand the capacity of these
Yeah.
individuals. Like they land, they build, and it's like, what are they building? Oh, more often than not, they're helping build civil infrastructure that's utilized
Correct.
by nations that they don't have the capacity to build this themselves, but
Yep.
we never highlight it unless you're
We-
watching the
yeah.
TV downrange AFN.
Right. And you know what's so funny about that is, like, to me, that storytelling part of that, or highlighting that, I mean, there's
Yeah.
a lot of people that part of the military would appeal to.
Yes.
When we think about, how we continue to reshape, the notion of the broken veteran that exists in many aspects of American society, that piece of it, connecting the dots between, on our phone, we hit buy, and that thing that you just bought on Amazon, how that shows up at your door later that day or tomorrow. Everyone forgets that naval sea power is one of the large reasons for over 100 years that our seas, our shipping lanes,
Yeah.
have remained free and clear, and can, there's still obviously, piracy that's out there, but it is not like it used to be at all, back in the day. And again, that storytelling piece, I think we just overlook that when we're trying to encourage young people about what they can be a part of. Like you said,
Exactly.
it's not just running, gunning, and kicking down doors and trigger pulling. There's so much more to service that you can contribute to this country, based on what your job might be, or what period of time you happen to serve in.
Yeah. And it needs to be celebrated. All of it needs to be celebrated. We
Yeah.
couldn't do Everybody focuses on the shiny individual whose mission and stories sometimes become highlighted in a book or in a Hollywood movie. But behind that individual is thousands of
Yeah.
careers that make it possible for that one person to go be highlighted in those action TV shows. And I like to say, like, you don't get anywhere without the conventional troops. You don't get anywhere without the real infrastructure of our military. And those stories need to be told. Those stories need to be highlighted because, yeah, you're right. Not every kid wants to grow up to be stuck in a hide site, pissing and shitting yourself. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, like that's not appealing to 90% of our population.
It's hard to sell. It's hard to sell. You can see why the Marine Corps went with the dragon and the sword.
Yeah. If you really highlighted a real recce mission, is
Yeah.
just like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
close up, some faraway, desolate place,
Right.
mountaintop, two
Yeah.
men sitting next to each other at night, freezing. Only one of them brings a whoopee because, weight considerations. These two men look at each other, hardened fighters. They snuggle closely, drape one whoopee next to each other for warmth. Now they're cuddled and holding each other. Then it's like pans out and it's like,
Yeah.
join the Marine Corps.
Join the Marine Corps. Yes, exactly right. Like, how do you set up a QR code on the TV for the scratch and sniff to be like, this is what that's going to smell like, and it's literally feces. It smells like shit.
Oh my
man.
gosh. Dude, like, what was it like in those because you said you joined in 97?
97. Yeah.
So that's before, like, that's really and truly when you're making your bread and butter on going to places for doing good.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I remember all of our instructors at School of Infantry, weapons school, all that. I mean, they were first Gulf War guys, by and large, and so we were just smack dab in the middle of that, and and so yeah, it was a lot of dog and pony show, at the end of the day. But to your point, being able to be out there and deploy the show of force, community engagement, whatever you want to call it. There was still a lot of really good things we did for that. One of the things when you were talking earlier that really stood out to me, a couple years ago, I was down in Orange County in Newport at the American Legion post there, and they were doing this celebration of Korean War veterans and World War II veterans, and the Korean government had a contingent there, and they are giving actually American veterans who served in Korea the special award
Wow.
because South Korea, it's celebrated so widely. South Koreans are so appreciative who kind of were who lived around that era of American presence there because their country, their lifestyle, their everything that they have now wouldn't all be the same.
Yeah.
And so it's little real life pockets of that of how our men and women who wore the uniform have made the ultimate sacrifice or you know um, served downrange. It's just an amazing testament to like the left behind piece of that.
Yeah.
And it's you could say whatever we want about our presence in Afghanistan, but there's a tremendous amount of people that are far better off, or that were far better off, because of
Yeah.
our presence there for a very, very long time.
Dude, it's one of the hardest things for a lot of us to move forward is obviously the withdrawal. But now in the age of social media, we
Yeah,
have influencers that are getting paid to promote travel into Afghanistan. And it's shocking. And it's like, dude, do you not understand that this is very much a regime that's brutal against their women, that's brutal
yeah,
against anybody that doesn't toe the line.
right,
There we have young American kids traveling through Afghanistan saying, "Yo, you gotta come here, bro." It's like,
right.
what
You,
the fuck?
that's wild. I remember, so my dad did 2 tours in Vietnam. He was the 82nd Airborne,
Wow.
and we always talked about going back to a trip to Vietnam.
Yeah.
And obviously the speed at which I feel like people's memories are short these days, or
Yes.
to your point, oh, let's spin up some tourism now that there's not a large scale conflict going on. It's just everything's truncated significantly. We never got to make the trip before he passed away, but I just exactly what you're talking about. He would not have been, he would have been losing his mind if it was that
Yeah.
soon after they were there, particularly how those guys came home and how they were treated. But
Yeah,
it's
dude.
uh it's just wild to think about if someone's like, yeah, let's sell a whole immersive experience. Let's it's yeah, it's kind of like it's very cringeworthy
It
on
is.
many many levels,
Yeah.
depending on what your exposure to it is, and just generally speaking.
Yeah. It's definitely like a hard thing to see. It's like scrolling across your feed and you're seeing a young 20-something American hand in
Yeah,
hand with a Taliban handler going through
right.
the northern Kunduz. And like, what world am I living in right now?
Uh, yeah, it's so. I apparently now the Afghan Convention and Visitors Bureau, which we have them all at major cities here
Yeah.
and states like Visit Florida. Now it's Visit Afghanistan, and so they're just transferring jobs, porting those over to tour guides.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Just what a time to be alive, dude.
Right, 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 right. Yeah, wild.
Oh. So what made you decide to, leave the military?
So I think I was so when I joined the Marine Corps, I got into a bunch of like 4 or 5 really good colleges, and I didn't feel like it was the right place at the right time for me to go into.
Yeah.
It just didn't seem exciting or interesting, and virtually all my other friends that I grew up with, they were going on to college, and quite frankly, when I told everybody that I was joining the Marine Corps, there's a giant what the hell are you doing? Like
Yeah.
why are you joining the military? You don't have to join the military. It was very much that age, that time, that period, in American history, that time frame that, if you didn't have to, if it wasn't, you didn't have some obligation or some reason that you're trying to get out of something, like at least, kind of where I was growing up in Florida, everybody just they were scratching their head. Even my grandmother, like she's like, oh, what are you doing? So,
Yeah.
um, and my family was very supportive. My dad, he told me, he goes, son, I support you, whatever you do, just don't join the goddamn Marine Corps. What did I do? I joined the Marine Corps. Classic move. And admittedly, I was not trying to rebel from him or anything like that. I think out of all the services, the esprit de corps of the Marine Corps, I just drank the Kool-Aid, and
Yeah.
it was exceptional, and I wouldn't trade my experience for anything. But back to your question. So I promised, I was very close to my grandmother growing up. She was a huge inspiration in my life to go on and be an entrepreneur, which we can talk about, a little bit later.
Yeah.
But I promised her after I did 4 years in the Marine Corps, I would get out. and I would go to college. And then if I want to go back after I went to college, she came from a generation, and even like our parents, very much college, college, college. That was once you do college, then you're set, which we know there's a lot more to it than that. Uh, but that was for me the big reason why I was like, okay, you got to get out.
Yeah.
And I think one other piece of it I would say as well, and you I think you know this a little bit, but I do a lot of work around suicide prevention, mental health, military families, and seeing the family dynamic, as a young person. And I didn't grow up in a like a perfect family. My parents were divorced a couple times over, had all the fixins, as they say, spare nothing, Uh, and so, no, but I very much enjoyed my childhood, but it comes
Yeah.
with a lot of those things. And anyway, so I just saw a lot of that, and through our deployments and just lots of the stuff that we talk about or took or see, or Jody getting one of your buddy's girls or whatever it might be, and it just that part of it, I was like, wow, that's really really challenging to deal with, and so that was another big consideration for me. But quite frankly, knowing what I know now, all the more reason, to respect what our service members go through. People have no idea. The average American, they can't fathom it. Even my wife now, we weren't together when I was in the Marine Corps, but she sees it firsthand. She's like, hell, I don't like it when you're gone for like 5 days, 7 days for
Yeah.
work. And as we've got a little kid at the house, a second one on the way, and she talks to my friends, she hears stories, she sees stories of like people who are on deployment and their kid was born, their daughter, son was born, and that is the reality of military service. That's the sacrifice. It's not just being downrange, being deployed. It's all these other things that weigh on you for your family. And so, I have just tremendous respect for men and women, colleagues, friends, acquaintances who have lived that and breathed that, and that's been a part of it, because you give up so much in service of this country, and there's just nothing that the government, that Americans can do to really show appreciation, demonstrate appreciation for
Yeah.
that. Not just the thank you for your service, which is admittedly a bit obligatory at this point, but it's how do we actually support our men and women, who wore the uniform, who are wearing the uniform, and military spouses and kids and all that. And there's just, and as you know, there's a number of things that I'm involved in that we can talk about later that are very much focused on how do we actually go beyond just saying thank you, and how do we actually create programs and
Yes.
do things in our everyday lives, in our local communities, wherever you live, that can actually walk the walk and talk, not just just actually walk the walk.
Yeah. It's important to understand that whenever there's a crisis, whenever we are needed, everybody rallies around. You remember like right after 9/11, like it was the most patriotic time in this country that I've ever experienced, and everybody loved their troops. Everybody had yellow the stickers, the flags, and you flash forward to the withdrawal of Afghanistan. And even years prior to that, there was the war fatigue. There was this idea of like, whatever, dude, every day, whatever. It's just a constant. I'll thank you in the airport. I'll give you a pat in the back.
Yeah.
And then as soon as the war is over, slowly the mentality is like, man, like these veterans, they really get a lot of money for their benefits, don't they? And I'm like, dude,
you're talking about the economist, that nonsense Economist article.
Oh,
Are you kidding me? Yeah.
Well, you guys have such handsome benefits, and it's like, wait a minute, dog. Wait a minute. You were doing everything you could to get every 18-year-old young man, young woman to sign up, and sold it as the greatest calling of your life. And I'm not saying that it's not, but I'm saying that you pushed and you pushed and you were begging and pleading for bodies to sign up. And the moment that it's more feasible to have drones, it's more feasible to have tech, now you start thinking about, well, where can we cut? Where can we trim this budget? And it's like, that shouldn't be the first place to look. That should be the second, third, fourth, fifth, seventh, eighth night. Should be at the very, very, there's so many other things to include your paycheck.
Yes. That's exactly right. There's always ample resources to send, young men and women to war, never enough once they come back.
Exactly.
It's a fact. I don't think it's limited to this country. It just seems to be like a tale as old as time, like across
Yeah.
every civilization. Once you go do your duty, come back, it's like, thanks, peace,
Yeah.
figure it out. You
Yeah.
know? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But it's sad too, because we expect it to come from people that don't serve. But then when you have representatives that are cut from the same cloth, that are part of your warrior tribe, and they don't immediately chime up, it's like, hey man, I need you to say something.
Yeah.
That becomes a
That's
betrayal.
exactly right.
And we don't have to throw out names, but there are plenty of individuals that have served and have moved on to be representatives. And I'm sorry, but if you're from the warrior tribe and you're now representing us as a member of our government, you should be able to stand up and say something.
Yeah.
And I get it. The Economist is not the greatest piece of journalistic propaganda out there, but
Yeah.
anytime something comes out there, that gets other people to start thinking and start questioning. And the more you bring those things into light, the more you scrutinize things like that, then it makes it easier for people to say, well, I read this piece in The Economist, and like that name does carry weight to some
It
circles.
does. Yeah. It plants a seed,
Yes.
and then others start to look at it and start to dig in and really think about it. But there was actually a Wall Street Journal article that came out a few days either before or after that quite frankly was so much more thorough, so much more balanced. Like the data and the diligence they did in their piece, you could tell was dramatically different.
Yeah.
And it was actually talking about the tremendous waste that the government actually does, like almost double paying insurers to
Yes.
take care of veterans. So you're paying an insurer in a particular area or a state, and then they're actually going to the VA. So they're not actually expending any money. It's like, whoa, let's just peel this back for a minute. We shouldn't even be, like you said, let's just go put the veterans way down the list, and actually let's look at the root cause of all this fat that's there, because there is so much to chop on top of this. Anyways, check it out if you get a chance. But I circulated that to a bunch of folks who were, just real fired up. I was like, well, look at this. This is actually this is the attention to detail that journalism should be actually looking at if we're going to have a intelligent conversation around veteran benefits, how they can be better, how we can improve them. Because we know it is still very much a flawed process. There's a lot of let's just call it inefficiency in terms of the process with the VA.
Yeah.
Still a big waiting list. We need more resources in and around that. And so I'm all for conversations about how we do it smarter and better.
Yeah. It's let's start with the VA. That's my first place. If you give me the power, that's the first place. The amount of redundancy and departments that shouldn't exist within the VA, it's just it's atrocious. And it's gotten so big, and everybody always says, like, the comparison I always hear is like, well, we should all have free healthcare, and the model for the healthcare system should be the VA. And I'm like, wait a second, dude.
Yeah. What is that? What do they call that? The dog catching the tire, right? Yeah. Chasing the cars up and down. Not going to be happy once you catch that thing.
It's like the biggest thing. It's like, all right, well, I feel you, and I agree, but that shouldn't be the standard. That shouldn't be the model of standard that you look at. Talk to any veteran, and they'll tell you. And of course, again, I've had success. People have shared success stories of their VA, so it varies. And there are a lot of individual providers that I have met that really are great human beings, but that doesn't take away from the system being broken. That doesn't take away from the issues that so many of our veterans have experienced. And that's something that even I weighed on when I was making my pivot. I'm like, fuck, I'm going to have to rely on the VA for my healthcare.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. There are so many men and women that I know personally, and that just obviously work in the VA, who are incredibly hardworking, brilliant. They deeply care about serving veterans and their families. But at the end of the day, that as this system is so large and there's so much that's plugged into it, it needs to be fixed at a systemic level.
Yeah.
Which is interesting when you start thinking about the incoming administration, Doge, with Musk and Ramaswamy, and looking at like how potentially they're going to think about fixing some of these or cutting some of that fat. I think it sounds like they're very much going to take hey, let's burn the forest and let new grow again,
Yep.
kind of thing. Whether that's good, whether that's bad, I'm not going to be able to unpack that in a
Yeah.
intelligent way on this for the time that we have here today. But it's good to see that we're starting to look at that and think about how we can do it in a thoughtful way, and we'll see ultimately where that lands. But I go back to, you know, the biggest indicator for me of how we are serving our veterans is veteran suicide and even active duty service
Yeah.
member suicide.
Yep.
And yet again, the suicide report just came out last week, at the end of last week, and it went up again,
Yep.
year over year. So despite spending more money than we've ever spent, on this issue, we still continue to get it wrong. And for me, most of the programs I operate in, we focus on an upstream solution. So how do we take into account, it's not just point of crisis. Once you've gotten a point of crisis, you've missed all these other opportunities for design intervention to support you, me, our brothers and sisters that we served with. And it's things like not just mental health and physical health, it's things like financial health, career health,
Yes.
relationship health, spiritual health, community health. There's others that get plugged in there. And so, how do we make sure that we've got robust programs across those different wellness factors, and we stack those with the right resources to support, everything that we're going through? Because when it happens fast. And if they're we know that 72% of veterans that die by suicide do it with a firearm. A firearm is highly irreversible, as we know, in comparison to other methods of
Yep.
suicide. I think it's something like 90+% of people that attempt suicide don't do it again. And so if you can figure out ways to create a tactical pause, in and around that, I didn't come up with that. Good buddy who served in the Navy did, but tactical pause, and turning some of this nomenclature and the way that we perceive, this whole issue of mental health into a strength and not a weakness. I
Yeah.
think to me, that's a huge opportunity. And the VA has tremendous resources, and figuring out how we can work with the leaders in VA, who some of them, I know they care about this a lot. They want to make a difference, but they're shackled by government programs and policies and a lot of things, just like when we serve in the military, we are in many respects.
Yes.
And so that change is gonna come from above, from legislators, ultimately, hopefully influenced by taxpayers. And but there's just so much that we can do in the short term. And I think that there needs to be so much more partnership in and around the private sector. And what
Oh
I
my
mean by
gosh.
that
Yeah.
is we've been relying on government and philanthropy to solve this problem.
Yep.
Not going to work. We have all the longevity of data to showcase that. We need the private sector to come in a big way. And part of that is we need the average corporate America to know this is an issue. We need to push this out in a way that people are willing to understand that
Yep.
it's a problem. And I think the other part of it that to me is really interesting is we couldn't deploy our forces like we do without the support of the private sector, without the KBRs, you know what I
Yeah.
mean, or the Lockheeds. And who are the household names that are supporting veterans and their families? The reality is there's very few of them. There's some big ones, around, financial services, USAA, but aside from that, again, there's not many if you really think about it. And so that's a big goal of mine, is to how do we incentivize, how do we get brilliant men and women who want to be founders and who want to solve this problem to start businesses that can solve these problems at scale.
Yeah. It's so true. I focus a lot on the peer-to-peer support, the grassroots movement, putting a face that's vulnerable and willing to share a story, and trying to combat the narrative of its weakness. Like,
Yeah.
'cause it's not, but it's never going to grow if we don't have the backing from the private sector. We don't have more. You can bring lots more resources to bear when you have that as an ally, and that's a reality. But it's going to take more individuals, and it's going to take a whole lot of effort. How did you find yourself in this space and to try to combat this?
Yeah. So I moved to San Diego in 2013. And so I lived in New York City for almost 8 years, then jumped back to Florida, then was in Denver, and then from Denver made my way out west. And just proximity, to, the military, community there. One of my friends, he had started something called Irreverent Warriors. If you're familiar with the Reverend
Yeah.
Warriors, the Silkies hikes, now Reverend Warriors is a part of Grunt Style Foundation. So I sit on, the board of Grunt Style Foundation now with the amazing, men and women that are a part of that. And so, excuse me. And so that living in San Diego kind of got me much, much closer, kind of tied back into, the military community just with proximity. That's not to say I hadn't, like when I was in Denver, supported a couple different nonprofits there. But again, like I said, just the density, you're like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, this is my tribe. These are my people. Aside from seeing, your buddies, once a year, every other year, it's easy to kind of, lose touch when you're traveling and all over and just not close to them. And so it was something that I wanted to lean back into at some point in your career. You've hustled a bunch and you're doing kind of well enough. And you're like, wait a minute, I want to make a bigger impact,
Hmm.
above and beyond just the business that I'm doing. Or you want your business to make an impact, in different ways. So at that time, I owned a healthcare business, a big media company that was focused on healthcare information technology. And so, the VA and the military, veteran families, TRICARE, all that kind of stuff was a part of some of those conversations and some of those programs that we were doing with our editorial team and event team. And so it just kind of bubbled back to the surface. And I was like, wait a minute, like let's lean into this and let's see, what's happening here. Let's think about how we can utilize data, how we can utilize technology to really focus on a lot of these issues, that are going on once men and women come home, because they're clearly not being served, well enough at all. And so, yeah, that really started that journey, back then. And then from that time, I've just been involved in supporting. I was on the board of Reverend Warriors, and so I've been involved in it since then, and
Yeah.
just the closer you get to it, the more you research, the more personal stories. And when you get closer to that, you hear more of those personal stories by virtue of proximity.
Yeah.
And so you just start to realize, holy shit, like even if you don't see it, there are so many people suffering in silence. And these aren't any things that we don't know now, but my dad, he passed away unexpectedly in 2012, and he struggled with PTSD. He struggled with his mental health forever. He
Yeah.
was he ended up being, I think it was 28 years sober, when he passed away. And it was one of those things, knowing what I know now, I believe I could have helped him tremendously,
Yeah.
but you don't know what you don't know. I wasn't close enough to it, to understand his personal journey that he was going through, and how, again, hindsight's 2020. So you can't
Yeah.
dwell on that. You can only focus on what can I do now, what's the positive impacts I can make now and today. And all of those things really kind of stack up why I give so many fucks about this issue. If I can drop the F bomb for effect. Swear. Okay.
Absolutely. You always. It's
Yeah.
Security
Okay.
Halt.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Good. Good.
Shit,
But
piss, cunt,
swear.
fuck,
Yeah.
whatever you want to say.
So swearing for effect is really important. You know what I mean? So,
It is. It's
yeah.
what gets the people going.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So, but yeah, so that is that's a big piece of it. Now, I've been involved in that for a long time. I'm a chair for the American Legion's suicide prevention and brain health program called Be the One, and so being able to look across their 1.6 million members, it's really really amazing to be able to work on how we deploy all those different
Yeah.
wellness factors and think about, well, we've got this population of 1.6 million. How do we take this as a microcosm where there's posts, there's departments, the connectivity that you have there is a really really powerful thing to be able to implement, and do some really great work on. Since, as an example, since February of last year, excuse me, February of this year, we've trained almost 12,000 men and women on suicide prevention training using the Columbia Protocol. And the training in and of itself is really important. It allows you to accomplish a couple things. It's CPR for the brain at the end of the day,
Yeah.
and CPR saves 200,000 to 300,000 people a year. So I think all of us would be like, oh yeah, I'll spend an hour to learn something, and maybe I could like save somebody. It's
Yeah.
a no-brainer from a timepiece, but it is it's hard to get people to understand and connect the dots on that. Also, suicide is this really hard, ugly issue that people, quite frankly, just want to stick their head in the sand on and not really pay attention to, particularly in corporate America. You say the lead with the word suicide, and they're like, "Oh, that's scary. That sounds like a
Yeah.
liability." So that the other piece I think is important, and I'm really interested to get your perspective on this. Is I think, because this is as much about a cultural change across the military as it is any type of technology or evidence-based intervention. If people aren't willing to raise their hand and ask for help, doesn't matter how many resources we have sitting there at the ready, that's not going to work. And so I think we need to reframe this whole notion of mental health and how we talk about it, which is why I
Yes.
love the term brain health. What I'm probably not going to talk about, like at the end of this podcast. I'm like, hey, Denny, got a jam, man. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go see my personal trainer. They're gonna smoke me. It's gonna be great. I'll talk about that. But you know what? I'm not gonna talk about. I'm not gonna be like, hey, I'm gonna go see my shrink because I'm
Yeah.
really whacked out here for whatever issue that I'm dealing with. Most people just won't do that because there's a negative association with that. So
Yeah.
how do we flip that around? How do we treat brain health just like anything else? All of a sudden, going to the therapist or brain optimization, brain health, whatever terminology and nomenclature we want to stick on it, how do we turn that into a point of strength to where anytime we're doing that, we're optimizing our brain, because it all starts with this.
Yeah.
If you want to pull the trigger more quickly, if you want to have more stamina, every single thing that we do serving in the military and life, husband, father, whatever it is, it starts up here. So we've for a very long time, we continue to separate this organ from the rest of the body
Exactly.
unnecessarily. And so I think that if we start as far upstream as we can go, I would love nothing more than to see when you first come into boot camp, when you first come into OCS, whatever your entry point is, we flip this, and it's not like this optional thing where you go see a therapist. This is your brain optimization session, or whatever terminology
Yeah.
we put on it to actually make it authentic and interesting. And I mean, hell, in the Marine Corps, we harp on sipping water nonstop. Everybody does, in any type of, military infantry unit. And it's the funniest thing. If you showed Americans like a bunch of grown men yelling at each other to sip water, it's the dumbest thing you've ever heard of if you really
Yeah.
think about it. So why is it this far-fetched to reshape culture and how we do things in the military when it comes to this?
Yeah.
Because then, go ahead,
It's hardwired in and it's specifically for men. It's hardwired in
yeah,
our experiences, and it's the old timers mentality that feelings and emotions, that's what makes you weak. And it's like, no, it's a fucking powerful strength. There's nothing
it
more
is.
powerful than being a well-developed fucking man. Masculinity means you're emotionally intelligent. Masculinity means that I need to take a knee. I need to go to my tribe. I need to go to my therapist. And it's that understanding of vulnerability is not a weakness. We
Right.
always think of vulnerability as, I'm going to be vulnerable here if the enemy moves this way up. I'm like, no. We're not playing chess. You're not playing war games. You're talking about vulnerability as a strength. We're talking about being able to sit down with somebody you trust, a trusted agent, somebody that can help you. I go to the gym. I have a trainer. Shout out Terry Wilson. That's my trainer. Shameless plug, because this will be airing in the new year. And we have to optimize every part of our lives, our mental well-being, our physical well-being, our spiritual well-being. We have to optimize it. And
Yep.
when we speak about strength, like, yeah, you're right. Like, we don't talk about mental health as a strength. I'm like, dude, I want to be the best version of myself for my kid, for my wife, for the future kid, for everybody that depends on me to be a leader within my community, within my space. And I'm only able to do that if I'm willing to be vulnerable, if I'm willing to say, I need help. I walked this path. I walked on this journey, because mental health is not something that you just take a magic wand, like, wow, you're better. No, it's a fucking road.
Yes.
Get on road and you're moving down the road, and maybe you have a flat tire, maybe you have a bad week, shit pops up. I'm going to get up on the phone. I'm going to talk to my therapist. I'm going to get back on track. I'm going to patch that tire and get back on my journey. And that's a reality. Being comfortable with that. Like, if you need a trainer, are you willing to go get a trainer? Yeah. Comes down to it, when you're tired of not making gains, when you're tired of not having the energy, not tired of not having the right meal plan, you'll go get a trainer. Same thing goes for mental health. When you're tired of fucking dealing with the same roadblocks, you're not making any pathways, you're feeling down, your anxiety's catching back up, reach back out, get back connected, and realize that, like, I know what it's like to be here at my optimum fitness level. Same thing for mental health. I know when I'm getting to the point where I'm like, fuck, I'm having an anxiety attack. What's going on? None of my tools are working. All right, time to figure out what's going on. We can't self-assess this thing sometimes.
Right. Oh,
Like,
and to your point, like, I don't know about you, but I certainly when I came to the Marine Corps, there was no mindfulness, no
yeah,
breath work, no resiliency skills or
yeah,
tools. Like
yeah,
basic things like that would go such a long way in giving people the opportunity to have a tactical pause. Like, yeah, your kid's screaming and he's a maniac. My kid's running around the house like
yeah,
being insane right now. But you know what? Their brains are developing. They don't know or they don't understand it.
yeah.
Someone at work is being a total pain in the ass. Like we're going to deal with these things all the time, and simple stuff. It is if you control your breath, it is a physiological response to reduce your blood pressure, your stress
Yep.
levels, and we have so much more control over our bodies than we understand. If you look at EKG up to your brain, throw it up on a screen, take a lot of breath, do some breath work, even for a minute. It is
Yeah.
wild how much control we have over the
Yeah.
brain, and we don't train that in, at the out front of how we perform.
No.
And
Or
to
we
me,
don't
that
talk
is
about it, or we don't
that
talk
that
about it
too.
like that's what we're doing. Because like mindfulness, certified mindfulness coach, been teaching mindfulness now almost going on shortly 4 years now. When I started understanding the concept of mindfulness, I'm like, holy shit, like breath work, vagus nerve. My
Right.
sniper instructor at sniper school was teaching me this, but
Yes.
he didn't call it mindfulness. I was
Right.
fucking missing nonstop. And he said, hey, back up off the glass, take some deep breaths, calm down,
Right.
close your eyes, just breathe. And I'm sitting there as, stressed out, Green Beret at sniper school.
Yeah.
And I'm like, fuck, close my eyes, get back on glass, flawless. It's like, yeah,
Right.
calm down. It's like, fuck, reading into fucking my mindfulness training and finally making that connection. Same thing with Bob's. Fucking sucked in the pool. I
Yeah.
fucking hate the water. The one time I felt confident, same thing. I had one guy that was willing to sit down with me
Yeah.
and just get me to calm down and realize that bobbing, the breath, you're just relaxing. You're
Right.
just exhaling. It's box breathing in water. And another
Yes.
that was never taught to us as if you were doing mindfulness. If
Right.
we did that, if we started teaching that as
That's exactly
mindfulness,
right.
dude, we'd be so much better. Then we realize,
Right.
oh, I'm getting upregulated. I'm too stressed. I'm going through anxiety. I just need a moment to pause, take a knee, do some seals. That's another thing, grounding exercise. Who
Yep.
knew that every time we're on patrol, we stop, take a knee, and do seals? We're doing a grounding exercise. Fucking, but the military still doesn't understand it.
The irony of this is we've been trained on this our entire careers from
Yeah.
start to finish. When the military says there is a purpose for everything, I still haven't figured out what we call it an ink stick or all the ridiculous nonsense that we give different terms. But neither here nor there. Uh, the point though is that it's exactly what you just said. This is already there. This is not a far leap to connect the dots to help shift that culture to where people stop thinking of it as a weakness, you think
Yeah.
of it as a strength. It already is a strength in that we're already doing it. We just need to kind of go that extra mile so that when you come in from the get-go, when you go off to see their wizard for your annual, sesh, or just like seeing the dentist. Again, some people
Yep.
don't need to do it nearly as much, which is perfectly fine. We all have different stuff that we've got to work on more or less than others. But the point is that it becomes normal. No one gives you
Yep.
shit for going to the dentist, or going to get, a physical, because it's just normal. It's part of the process.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's something that we have to understand, like from the very beginning. Losing control of your emotions doesn't make you a man. And we idolized that. I know I did. I looked at the leaders that would lose their mind and have all these explosions of anger and be violent and like, oh, that's leadership. That's a man. It's like,
Yeah.
no, we idolize that. And that's why cadre, when you go through like these soft courses, they're not the guys that are yelling at you. They're fucking blank. They're looking at you. Hey, try it again. Keep moving forward. Yep, that's a no-go. And it's like, wait a second. Like, you don't have to have this whole thing where you're yelling at me and throwing shit. Like, no, okay, got it. I'll move forward. I'll do it the right way. And the one thing that sticks to me now, it's like understanding that there's so many of us that grew up in those households where it's like, if somebody yells, that's power. It's like, no,
Yeah.
control your emotions.
Agreed.
You're going to be angry. It's going to dissipate. Let it
For
go.
sure.
You don't have to be that guy. I know I was that guy for a long time, till you get in front of a counselor, till you get with a therapist, and you understand anger is that secondary emotion that's often hiding and masking everything else that you're feeling. And then you're sitting in an inpatient treatment center, and somebody hands you an emotions wheel, and you're looking at this fucking wheel with emotions, and you're like, oh, I know anger, I know happiness, I know sad. Oh shit, there's a whole bunch of other ones I never tap into. What the fuck am I doing?
Yeah. No, speaking of that, 'cause I know you're an expecting father. Do you know Ryan Holiday by chance?
Yes.
Okay.
Very
Yeah.
well. All
Okay.
of his books.
Okay. Great. Yeah. It's I just and actually my brother turned me on to him, and like stoicism just as
Yes.
a whole concept, and
Yep.
I love that outlook on the world. And he's got this awesome newsletter called The Daily Dad.
Yep.
And it is these and some other books too, but just I think our generation, we have this intention to be the best version of as a father or a mother as you can. And I love the perspective and outlook that they take with it. And his whole, the way he approaches exactly how you're talking about these things is there's so much nuance to this. There's so much self-reflection that you can have in this. And there's also so much understanding of, hey, just take a time out, man. Like, this is a little growing being, organism in the universe, figuring its shit out, stressed out because it wants to communicate something to you that might be very positive or good, and can't do it because it doesn't have the words to do that. It can, it just hasn't developed that yet. So I love that perspective on it, because I think all of us at different periods of our time, our life, as we're growing up, same thing. You've heard I've heard a number of people talk about when they're thinking about needing help, and they're just in a murky pool of water, and they can't see up or down. The surface is right there. They just don't know how to get to it. And sometimes you just need a hand to plunge down and pull you up, and orient you in the right way so you can figure it out. And anyways, all these things are interconnected, and I think that there's just really, really amazing. You could call it a philosophy. Some people think that's a little too willy-nilly, but outlook, framework, whatever you want to call it, tactics. But that approach, the Stoics and Holiday, how they employ that, there's just this whole, I think, cascade effect to your overall well-being in life that you can take that's just really, really powerful.
Yeah. I have to ask you, because this is along the same lines of what we're talking about now in life. I have to imagine that you've got so many things that you're juggling. How do you keep yourself performing at optimum levels and staying healthy when it comes to your brain health, your mental health? What are some of the things that you're leaning on?
Sleep is really, really important. Prioritizing sleep. I know that's one of the things that, and listen, I think, what is it? I think, like, I don't know, 5% of people are like those people that can actually get 3 or 4 hours of sleep every night, and they're actually good to go. I am not one of those people. I would really, really wish that I was, when you think about all that productivity that you could get back. Sadly, I'm one of those mere mortals that has to deal with it like the rest of everybody else. But no, sleep's really important. Exercise, and oftentimes, like, I won't have time for a workout. Kid, businesses, all the things, travel, relationship, continue to have a healthy relationship with my wife. But just even if you're going out on a walk. I live in California. We've got a lot of hills around. Even just getting the heart rate up a little bit, vitamin D, just that, having that right mix of that is so important. I think for me, it helps to clear the fog, clear the head out, so you can have that really great mental acuity. I think also a big thing is levity is really important. You're gonna fuck things up.
Yeah.
I have fucked up more things in my career, business failures, issues, and I've learned so much more from that than you possibly ever could from the successes, interestingly enough. I don't think that's something that we talk about enough. But and being able to laugh at that, because I did a executive program at HBS, several years ago, and brilliant professor was talking about fail fast, fail forward. And there's only no value in failure if you don't learn from it.
Yep.
And then and he had some way that he would delineate between mistakes and failures. And mistakes, I think he kind of framed up as not being there's no value in mistakes, but failure, as long as you learn from it, there's tremendous value, because you then evolve, you implement, you pivot, whatever you need to do for that particular process, individual thing you're doing, or business rationale or thesis that you had. So those are three, I think, key things for me. And then the other thing is, Michelangelo had, I think, the best saying of all time when he was like 60, or after being the most accomplished artist, on the planet or in history at that point in time, and for his era, and also now and today, I am still learning.
Yeah.
And I just always learn. I know a lot. I've had experienced a lot of success, a lot of failure, but there is so much more that I don't know that I ever will learn. And I think that that's just such an important outlook, because that drives humility versus the other piece of that. And sure, have I been guilty of, hubris, being a little arrogant now and then? We all are. That's just the nature of
Yeah.
humanity. But I think the older that I get, really continuing to lean into that piece of it is really, really important, because that also drives, the more you learn something new, you're developing new neural pathways. And that keeps, at least for me, the brain young. You're interesting, you're engaged with your colleagues, friends, family, whatever. I don't know. I think those four things, they really, really help me in a big way.
Absolutely. Man, Waco, thank you for being here today, man. Being able to talk openly on these issues is so important, and it allows others to see that, like, dude, this is not an anomaly. Like, after service in the military in the past 20 years, and for some of you even more, you cannot expect to walk out unscathed with no issues. The
Yeah.
reality is, like many of us, you're going to struggle. You're going to have issues, but that's okay. That's life. You're literally not able to experience all the calamity of warfare and walk out in the clean slate. You're going to have some issues. Maybe they're not as complex as a lot of us have suffered, but there are things that you will have to address, and it's okay. It's understanding that there's beauty in rebuilding and going and getting help, because just like we talked about earlier, if you want to get fit, if you want to get jacked, if you want to have the physical PRs, if you want to be able to run those freaking endurance runs, you got to get a coach. You got to get a personal trainer. And there's nothing wrong with walking into that P3 clinic on post, or that mental health clinic on post, or in your community, finding a therapist, a clinical social worker to help you find those resources that are going to help you get better. There's nothing wrong with it. Please, if you need help finding these resources, hit me up. I will literally sit down and I will point you in a direction. In fact, that's what I did all last week, and I love doing it because it's something that we can do. If you can hold space for somebody, if you can get a peer-to-peer support certification, do it. Be willing to be involved in your community. It takes all of us to help bring somebody out from the void. Waco, if we want to hear more about you and what you're doing, where can we find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me at emails whoover@mcon.live, whoover, HOOVER, at mcon.live. Hit me up anytime. I echo your same sentiments, Denny. Always here for strangers or anybody or close friends. And I love what you just said about the peer support piece, on that. We can solve this problem ourselves through our communities and in really, really compelling ways.
Absolutely, man. We started our peer-to-peer program on Security Halt within like the first 3 seasons of the show, and it's always open. You're welcome. Check us out on securityhalt.com. Go to peer support. If we get enough people where they want to keep it private, we'll keep it a closed group. But more than often than not, you'll jump in. You'll have different people jump in and share their stories and offer their support, because it's about sharing resources. What's worked for us can help somebody else. And even if it didn't work for me, I still offer it up, because it's a lived experience. It may not have worked for me, but it may work for you. To everybody tuning in, thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting us. Waco, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you all next time. Till then, take care.
My pleasure. Thanks, Danny.